Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester. You know what I like to do on my show? I want to enlighten you. I want to inspire you. I want to empower you to become your best self. The scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about our author, Jeanne Schaeberle. Her book is entitled, Mom, Let's Talk. So you know what I'm going to tell you to do. Go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Jeanne. Thank you so much for being on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, as we do here on the show, before we get started talking about your book, there may be one or two folks out there that are unfamiliar with who you are, so I would love for you to take a moment, if you will, to introduce yourself to them. So the question always is, what makes you you?
That's a good question, and it's hard to talk about myself, but I will. I think what makes me me is my family. I have a wonderful husband of 46 years. I had 4 children, and I have 4 grandchildren, and that keeps me busy. Of course, before that, I was a medical secretary, and I ran an office for 10 years, and I loved that. And I think that's what helps me stay organized. What else about me can I tell you? Just that my favorite phrase is, I don't have any dogs, cats, or goldfish, but I have 4 grandchildren, 3 boys and 1 girl, and I love being a grandmother.
And,
I'm a good friend.
I think you're right that being a grandparent must truly be something awesome, because that's something that most grandparents are so happy that they are grandparents. And that would be my mother included. I remember that she said that being a grandparent is just the best thing in the world. So I have to kind of give you a high five on that one. I'm sure your grandchildren appreciate that. Now, being an author, did you always want to be an author, or did you find that that was just the next step along the path called life?
Well, that's interesting. I actually don't consider myself an author, and I know my editor would hate having me say that. I was a mother who kept a journal of all 4 children. My idea was to present them with a little book about themselves in their 40s. Of course, Robert's book changed things because he's our firstborn and he wrote poetry, and when he died, I took on publishing his poetry for him. So I will probably still write 3 more books, but they won't be for the public. Their books will be completely different from this one, because this one had a lot to give publicly. So I've always taken journals. I kept journals while I was a kid, so it's just something I always did.
I find it quite curious that most of my authors who have been on, the answer to that question is no. I had no idea I was going to be an author. Like, I didn't mind writing, but kind of like what you said, I don't think of myself as an author. I just happen to have written a book, and it's just so it's so funny that people take on that perspective. But it's like, yep, you're definitely an author. I love it. I love it. Now the title, Mom, Let's Talk. How did you come about your title?
The short answer to that is, I mentioned that Robert was ill and that he died and had poetry. Short answer is, I set out to publish his poetry, something he had been trying to do for years. Robert was mentally ill. He had schizophrenia, but that did not define who he was. He loved conversation, he loved writing poems. He took a lot of medications, of course, with the schizophrenia, which made him very sluggish and hard to complete things. He would fall asleep in the middle of things, and he did manage to publish 2 poems on his own in a newsletter with the place he lived and another anthology of poetry. When I was going through his poetry and met with another poet to see if this was a feasible book, she said this would not make a good anthology because his poetry alone is too intense. That needs a story behind it. So I wrote a book. I was writing it. I took inspiration from photos of them while they were kids, and it actually took me 6 years to write this book. First 3 years I spent going through the journals I had kept with all that he kept, with many poems. He had all kinds of journals, and he had poems written on napkins and scratch paper and anything that was available for him when he needed to write. So I transcribed his poems, and the different stages of his writing interested me because there were barely legible handwriting when the chaos was bad for him, to normal bad writing when things were just bad. When I finished transcribing the poems, I sought help. I didn't know where to go first. So I called the Columbia Foundation here in Maryland because they help a lot of people that have had children die and they step things up. Well, they suggested I call Ho'oponopono, which is an acronym for Howard County Poetry and Literary Society. They suggested the poet laureate of Maryland at the time, Linda Joy Burke. She is a performing poet and writer. She suggested I pick out about 25 poems and bring them to her, and she would look it over and see if we had a book. So she suggested the poems were really, really good and very revealing for Robert. They were revealing to show us what kind of chaos he went through at the time that he wrote the poetry, which became cathartic for him. She suggested I write family stories to support his poetry, and as it turns out, like I said, I was keeping journals for all 4 kids, so I wrote short stories inspired by photos, and the family stories helped support the poetry. So I hope when you read the book you found it interesting.
Thank you so much for telling us about why you put the book together, and I hope that I didn't miss it. So please excuse me for asking this question again. But why the title, "Mom, Let's Talk"? Is that something that he used to say to you?
That's actually my favorite story of the book. My son, Robert, at 2.5 years old, was very articulate, and he loved to talk. And he would actually come to me and say, "Mom, let's talk." And I would say, "Okay, Robert, what would you like to talk about?" And I'm not going to give it all away. It's in the book. He would reply, "Let's talk about Mickey Mouse." "Mom, he has really big ears, doesn't he?" Well, we had just been to a mall, and Mickey Mouse was bigger than life, and that's what he was remembering. But it's my favorite story because it's who Robert was. He loved conversation and communication, and I thought that was pretty cool from being 2.5 years.
Well,
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, up to 25 years. His stories got a little more intense than Mickey Mouse, but he did love conversation, which I think helped us as a family get through his situation.
Well, I'm so glad that that I went back and asked you that question again, because that's really important, because everyone has a story behind why they entitle the books the way that they do. So thank you. So listeners, just in case, she answered the why she wrote the book first, then why the title. So just to clarify that. Now,
Okay.
so many times when we have someone in our family that suffers from mental illness, we get an array of reactions from our family members. Some people are able to deal with it, others are not. Some may come around so that they can learn more and want to know that person, that they love that person. They want that person to know, I love you and I'm here for you, even though I may not understand everything that's going on. Others choose to many times avoid people because they don't know what to do. How did your family members handle living with someone who was dealing with schizophrenia?
Oh, that's a challenging question, and it was a challenge of a journey to take. Robert had one sister and two brothers, and they were all close in age. There were nights that Robert would scream out in the middle of the night, waking the whole household. He was very disturbed by the demons that seemed to be after him, and it was very disturbing for us. He wasn't the only one that woke up. At one point we gave him a guest room, hoping it would keep his siblings quiet during the night. And when he screamed out, and they were blood-curdling screams, they were scary. Mark and I would be startled by the screams and run down the hall to see if we could help. And we could only shake him awake and talk and move on. There's our talking again, conversating in the middle of the night. It was not easy to go back to sleep after that either, because our hearts were beating pretty fast. As it turns out, Robert's siblings were very supportive of him, even though they did not understand what was really going on. We were all learning about schizophrenia.
Yeah.
And go ahead. As they got older, they got licenses and cars, and they would drive Robert to McDonald's and to the mall. And I was proud that they all got along, but worried about Robert. He did not have a license because he was under the influence of so many drugs, and he was afraid to drive. And I think that was good for him to not drive, because I would have been worried about that. So,
of course.
Now, later in life, as they became young adults, this was the hard part for them, and it still is a question in the air. As thoughts of marriage and children come into the picture, they all wondered about having children because they lived with Robert and they did not want to deal with mental illness in their adult lives. They struggled with marriage and bringing children into the world. And I don't know if this disease is hereditary or not. I did have a sister who was schizophrenic, and living and taking care of her throughout my life was an issue for me too, the same things. So I understood what my kids were going through, and I could just be there for them. And I'm really fortunate that they liked to talk, because I think that got us all through his life, got us all individually through what we were dealing with.
And I can definitely understand one's concern, because there is a common thought and understanding that mental illness does run in families, depending on what we're talking about. And schizophrenia is one of those, as is bipolar disorder, so on and so forth. So I can definitely understand their concern, but I'm so glad that they were able to love on him, and choose not to shun him as teenagers. I can see how that could have been a tough choice for them, but instead they chose to love on their brother. And I think that's an awesome bit, and it says a lot about who you guys are as a family. It is time for us to go to break. But before we do, can you remind everyone, Jeanne, please, what is the title of your book? Where can we get a copy? And, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the title of my book is Mom, Let's Talk. It's on Amazon and other bookstores. I'm on Facebook, and my email is in the book.
We'll be back. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buckchester, but my guest today is Jeanne Schaeberle, and I'm so excited to be talking to her about her book, Mom, Let's Talk. So, Jeanne, my next question for you, since this is Faith Talk Radio, and I do always ask everyone how their faith plays a part in who they are and how they're able to do all that they do, how do you believe that your faith fit into your day-to-day life with all that you had going on?
Well, that's a heavy question. I was a Catholic and brought my kids up as Catholics. We went to church on Saturdays for religious education. On Sundays we had Mass. And I was always surprised at my children. In the ride home, I had an audience that I talked about the homily, and I was always amazed that they got something out of it because of all the squirming they did while they were in Mass. As far as all the little things we did at church, we actually set the table for dinner like the altar is set at the communion. And we talked about our day and our concerns and the fighting about something. Sometimes things got serious. And they were close in age, and their friends were close in age, and they all played together. When we got to middle school and high school, life got really serious. So talking at dinner time was really important. Drugs were an issue among their peers, and suicide happened, and tragic accidents happened. So the talk was very serious. And sometimes I felt like I was on a suicide watch after these events. They all were so vulnerable, including me. Talk, talk, talk is what we did. This is where I often thought God doesn't give you more than you can handle, but I wondered about that. And they can they handle more bad news? I'm not sure I could, but we prayed and we all got through it. So we planted a lot of trees in memory of friends.
And I think when we tell our stories, telling it from the perspective of being a mother is always a great perspective, because you're telling it from a place of love. No matter what's going on, it's like these are my children, or this is my family. This is something that I pour my all into, and I think people will definitely understand that. Now, for a mother that's listening today that may be going through something quite similar, how did you handle everything? How were you able to keep it together? Faith is a huge part of who we are as believers, but kind of drilling down a little bit more from that mother's perspective. What advice could you give to another mother from what you did to keep it all together as a mom?
Okay. I am 75 years old, and I still don't know how I got the parenting thing off, but I did. I think I was a good parent, but I really researched and read a lot of self-help books for ideas. And two of my favorite books that I have always suggested throughout the years, my favorite was How to Talk to Kids So Kids Will Listen, and How to Listen to Kids So Kids Will Talk by Adele Farber and Elaine Mislish. I hope I didn't mess up that word. This is the best communication book I have ever read, and it's simple to read. The second book, which was very important to me, was How to Survive Schizophrenia. I feel like I had to study the disease so I could best help Robert. And I went to psychiatrists to understand schizophrenia and all the medications they were giving him. So he went to doctors and went to doctors. And before all of that, I was a medical secretary before I was a mother. And I had to-do lists at work. And they seemed to work. If I could check things off, I felt like I had a good day. So chaos made more sense when I had lists to work from. So I found it necessary to I even made a smell the roses list, because the list of everything I had to do for kids and keep me on my toes was getting through the day. The other one I made was smell the roses list to make sure I had time for me, because you really get bogged down helping all four of these children and my husband and myself. So that's what I did. So my advice to mothers is to read at least How to Talk So Kids Will Listen and How to Listen So Kids Will Talk. Of all the parenting books, I found that really helpful.
Absolutely. And thank you for the suggestion of those books, because, I think that is one of the best things that we can do, not only as women, but especially as moms, is to share the resources that we have found to be helpful, because there's someone else out there who is just at, his or her wit's end. They just don't know where to start, or they're starting to get a little frustrated. And just that extra little boost that says, hey, you can get through it, definitely can help. Now, even though you're talking from the perspective of being a mother with a son who has schizophrenia, who would you say is the ideal reader of your book? Did you make it accessible or make it easy to understand for a broad audience, or someone who's coming from the perspective of loving someone with mental illness only?
No, it's not just for people with mental illness. I think it would appeal to teachers because they deal with all kinds of children. I think it's good for parents because I have a lot of advice to give. And I think it's good for young people. I've had a few young people read the book, and they were very pleased with it. And what I have found from people reading the book was that people want to talk. And that's what we need, is to talk and make it easy so we can get rid of this stigma of mental illness.
Absolutely. If we could get rid of the stigma, oh my goodness, the number of people that could actually go out and get the help that they need, because we don't put that stigma on other things the way that we do mental illness. But our brothers and sisters, our family members, our loved ones, our neighbors, coworkers, they need that support from us, and they don't need to be shamed. They need to be encouraged to get the assistance that they need. You are so right with that. Now, was there, for so many of the authors that I have on, they see that when they were doing their research or they were doing their writing and really kind of putting their thoughts together in the way in which we now receive it as a finished product, that they learned something along the way, that not only were they trying to enlighten or inspire the reader, but they themselves became enlightened or inspired. Did you find that you learned anything as you were putting the book together?
Well, I didn't discover what I learned until after I wrote the book, because writing the book was very painful journey for me. It was like a big crying jag for 3 years. But yes, Robert discovered the healing power of his poetry, because the poetry took him out of his moments of chaos while he wrote. And I discovered after all these years the healing power of writing, as I had grieved through the writing of the book. And I think that was really important. I know I cried a lot. It was a really hard journey to go through, but I think I put it all out there. I don't know how you feel, but I feel like I put it all out there. But so hopefully it will help people that are inspired to talk about their own lives.
Now, one of the questions that I tend to frequently ask is about future endeavors. Do you plan on writing other books for the general population? I know that you mentioned that you like writing in general, but as far as sharing those thoughts and ideas with others, will you write any more for the public?
I don't think I'll write any more public books. I think I've really burned out on this one. But I will write for the 3 kids to give them their just a fun book so they can see how I saw their growing up. But I don't think I'll make another public book.
And those are, for someone who's like, why would she do that? Let me tell you, those are amazing. I had an aunt who did that very same thing. Now, my father was born in 1935, and his sister was a little bit older. And over the years, she was the only sister of 4 children, so she kept like these little journals, kind of like what you're doing, of just the goings on of what her brothers were doing, what her parents were doing. And once she retired, she took all of that information that she had saved along the way, and she made bound books for all of us.
Really?
And it was amazing to go back and read the stories of the things that my father had done along the way, things that he had even forgotten, of things he had achieved, or those little stories that only a sister, and in your case, only a mother, would be able to share. And it's like, this one moment happened, and he's like, wow, I didn't even know you saw that. One of those being kind or being nice, like helping an elderly neighbor across the street, or tying the shoe of a little kid so that they wouldn't fall. And it's like, I saw those moments. I wrote about those moments, and it's like, wow. It's really nice to know. So absolutely. I think your kids are definitely, or even your grandchildren will definitely one day will appreciate that you took the time to share those stories about them. I find that it is priceless to be able to capture those, to read about those moments that have been captured. So I love it. I love it. Well, my last question for you is, again, kind of just being an author in general, and I understand that you don't want to write anymore for the public, but for someone who is having a tough go at it, and they're trying to really kind of get in the right headspace to sit down and start writing, do you have any words of encouragement for someone who is an aspiring author who thinks that right now is the time to get started?
Well, I think we all have stories. It takes time to sit down and put them on paper or computer, but like I did, I had my journals and I had photos that inspired me, and I think everybody's got a story to write. You just have to focus on it. And this book I learned so much. I mean, when I first wrote it, everything was dramatic because Robert had died and I had to deal with that, and I was dealing with making the book. And then 20 years later, right now, I am comfortable with the fact that he's in a better place. So it took 20 years to get used to this. I miss him very much, but, I think his poetry is good, and I think he had a good life. Even though he was schizophrenic, it, like I said, did not define him. He had friends. So as I grieved about this book, I think I became an adult. Well, at 75, I should be an adult soon.
Right.
So I hope it helps people that need the book.
I definitely think that it will. Like you said, everyone has a story that they can share, and especially one that helps to inspire others. Well, Jeanne Schaeberle, thank you so much for spending time with me here today on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. Before I let you go, if you could please, one last time, remind everyone what is the title of your book and where can we get a copy?
Mom Let's Talk is on Amazon, Borders, and any other bookstores. And you can get in touch with me if you buy the book. My email's in there. And I'd love to hear about people that have read the book.
Absolutely, absolutely. Make sure, everyone, that you definitely reach out and let her know that you picked up a copy of the book. Thank you again, Jeanne, for being on the show.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And listeners, thank you for spending time with us as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Good morning, and thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Buck-Chester. You know what I like to do on my show. I want to enlighten, inspire, and empower you to become your best self. The scripture reminds us that the tongue is a small thing that makes grand speeches, but a tiny spark can set a great forest on fire. And today we want to get you fired up about our author, Sharon Lawlor. Now, her book is entitled Why Marry? So go on, get comfy, get cozy, get your coffee or get your tea, because we are about to get started. Good morning, Sharon. Thank you so much for joining me on Daily Spark with Dr. Angela.
Good morning. It's so nice to talk to you.
I'm so glad to have you on. Now, I love the title of your book, and I cannot wait to pick your brain about it. But before we do, we always spend a little time introducing our guests to those one or two people out there that may be unfamiliar with you or with your work. So my first question to you is what makes Sharon Sharon?
What makes Sharon Sharon? Wow. Probably all the things I've been through in my life. Grew up in Pennsylvania. My husband was in the service, so we traveled a lot. I was a mom and did all the mommy things, and then, lost my husband and was single for a while and went to college. Not allowed to go after when I was young because girls didn't go to college back then. So then I went to college, and then I remarried, and life took me on a different turn, and I finished my college education when I was 55, and then went to seminary. Yeah, I went to seminary at age 58, and I thought it was crazy because I couldn't remember where my keys were, but God was calling me to study Greek and Hebrew, and I really thought that was stupid.
I love it.
But I know, but God provided my tuition, the entire tuition for 5 years. God provided that. And so when I wanted to quit Greek, I couldn't because God was paying my tuition. And out of that, I graduated with my second master's degree, and then went on to do a THM in systematic theology, and that's when I wrote the book.
I love that. There's someone right now saying, oh my goodness, she is so giving me strength. She is giving me the power to keep moving on. And I saw a meme the other day, and it was, the same type of thing. It's like, if you get married after 30, that's still an awesome thing. If you buy your first house after 40, it's still a beautiful thing. If you don't start your business until after 50, it's still a beautiful thing. Like, don't short sell yourself. Don't compare yourself to other people. Whatever's supposed to happen in your life is going to happen in its own perfect timing, and still be proud of that. So there's someone going, yes, she is my sister for sure, because she kept moving moving forward. I love that. What a great way to start the show. I love it. Now, being an author, is that something that you always wanted to do, or did you find that, like, along the way, was that kind of tickling your brain saying we should do this, or did you find after you've done all of that, that's when God really placed it on your heart that you needed to be an author then?
Okay, so this is really funny because I didn't have any desire to be an author. I never thought I would be an author. And when I was writing my thesis for my THM program, which is similar to a PhD, my thesis advisor said, this is a really interesting topic and you really should write a book. And I was like, yeah, right. Well, let me just write the thesis and I'm done. And we were pretty much going along that route with him saying you should write a book and me saying, I don't think so. And then as he was grading the last chapter of my thesis, he was in an automobile accident and he was killed. And I was like, now I have to write the book, right? So that's how I became an author. And it wasn't easy. It was not.
I can imagine. Oh my goodness. Yes, I can definitely imagine. You know, I've talked to some other authors as well that they had great tragedy happen and they go, it was, looking back, of course, it was a great distraction to help you get through the grief, but it was just, you know, boy, the emotional toll that it takes on you. So yeah, I can definitely understand that. Now, your title of the book, and I've given the short version of Why Marry, but please give us the full title, and then why did you choose that title?
Okay, so the book is called Why Marry? From a Mother's Heart, a Fresh Perspective. And the reason for that is when I was doing the research for the thesis, my topic was where did the whole idea of Mary as somebody to be worshipped, where did that come from? Where did it start? And I had done some research on that and wasn't really getting very far with it. I did my thesis on the biblical, whether or not it's biblical, which we don't see that being biblical, something that would be people should be doing. But so that was the thesis. But the book itself, it came to be because why are people doing that? And if it's not biblical, then how did it start? Where did it come from? So that was the title. Why Mary? Why are people treating her almost like a goddess? The Queen of Heaven. Why are they doing that? So that's the title.
Right.
And then from a mother's heart, because honestly, all my research, all the great thinkers were always men, and they didn't have the same ideas. They weren't the way I was seeing them. So it had to come from a mother's heart. And Mary was a mother, and how would she feel if she saw what was being done? So that's why it's from a mother's heart, because men just weren't getting it.
Right. But just in case for that person as well, what I don't understand, and it's like absolutely, because wives, mothers will say, well, did you ask this question? Like, no, I didn't think about it. Well, how about this? Did you ask this? And it's like, no, didn't think about it. And you're right. Just not that any one gender is better than another, but we do think differently, and which means that we're going to ask different questions. So I like that. I like that you're pulling that in. That's a good thing. Now, when you were writing the book, and this is before necessarily you have chosen the cover and all that good stuff, how much research do you believe that you had to do in order to make the book what you finally wanted to do? Did you keep track of how many hours of research or how much time that took you?
Okay, so the research that I was doing for the thesis was about 2 years, and then when I started writing the book, it was another 1.5 years of research because like I say, the things I was looking at, I wasn't finding what I needed, and then I bought all these books. I was reading all these books. I wasn't finding the beginning. What's the very beginning? And then I got very sick. I got bronchitis. I was sick for 3 weeks. And towards the end, I was feeling a little better. And I went in my office and I was like, well, there's this little tiny book there. Maybe I'll read that one. And that's where I found it. It was like in this little book I had just a bit overlooking. But I found where it began. It began in Constantinople, Istanbul, back in the 5th century. So it was a total of about almost 4 years of research that went into it.
And it's so funny, but isn't that just like life? Sometimes the answer that we're looking for is like right there. It's kind of little or tiny, and it's tucked away, and it's like it was here all along.
I know.
I love that. I love that. And people laugh sometimes, and they're like, you see things in a very different light, and it's like it's just quite funny to me how we're looking for such a grand answer. We are looking for the thundering and lightning, and it's really just right there in the little old caterpillar or that cute little butterfly that keeps fluttering, and you shush the butterfly. It's like, get out of the way. I'm looking for the thunder and lightning. And it's like, but I'm the answer. So
that's right.
I love it. I tell you. Now, was there a particular point when you felt like giving up on the process? I mean, you're going through, a lot emotionally, but yet you're still moving forward. Did you ever have a moment where you said, I need to take a pause, or maybe I shouldn't do this right now at all?
Yes, actually, the first part of the book was the history part, so that was kind of fun to write. Then I was getting into the part of the book where I give a biblical response to the 4 Marian dogma, the things that they say they have to believe about Mary. And as I was beginning to write that, I was like, here's the problem. I was talking to God. I say, here's the problem. I'm writing this thing, but I don't really have a heart for these people. It's like, I know I'm supposed to. I know I'm supposed to care about where they are and what they believe, but it's just not there. And that night, I went to choir practice, and he handed us a new anthem. And the new anthem was called, Listen to the Lambs all a-crying, I want to go to heaven when I die. And that was what I needed, because that was really my heart, was I didn't want to see people miss out on the truth because of something they were being taught that wasn't true. And that was what took me over the hump. That was what took me to the next part where I was able to finish the book. And that's where it was. It was just that hymn. And actually, that's right in the front of the book. Listen to the lambs, all a-crying, I want to go to heaven when I die.
Oh, wow. That I love that. I think that for so many people, when I hear the scripture, I apply it and I try to think of it in a very visual way. And sometimes, even though I may not share like an expounded version with others because I don't want to add to the scripture, but to me, it's like I need to be able to see it. I need to be able to hear it. I need to be able to speak it. I need to be able to touch it. And sometimes those promptings will speak so loudly to one person and not as loudly to another. Like you had an epiphany moment in that moment where someone else was like, oh, that's nice. But it was really what you needed in that moment to be able to push forward. And I love that. My listeners have heard me say, I pray many times, place me along someone else's path, but just equally as so, place others along my path so that we can continue to do this thing that you have purposed us to do. And that was an example. To me, that was an example of that. You needed to hear that at that moment, and that was your fuel. I love it. I love it. Now, I know that in the world we always have those people that are a little bit of naysayers, a little, hateration, as they used to say, that would go, yeah. So in the vein of that person who says, Dr. Angela has a whole lot of guests on here, Sharon, and everyone says that their book's awesome. With that being said, what makes your book different? Right? Because, there's always that one person that's like, well, I don't think it's all that good. It was just all right, But I think that every author brings a certain perspective to anything that they talk about, because you get to see the world through their eyes. You get to experience what they've been experiencing, or share in the knowledge that they have. So my question to you is what makes your book different or unique, or why do you feel that your book adds to the voices that need to be heard about the topic?
Okay, so the book is actually 3 books. The first part is a story. I wanted to tell the historical part of it in a way that wouldn't be dry. And my son's old English teacher turned me on to a book called Seabiscuit about the horse, where it was historical. It's all endnoted, but it reads like a story. And so the beginning of my book starts out with the story of this girl, a little girl crying in the garden because her mother has died. And it goes on to show how she grows up and she becomes the person who brings the veneration of Mary into the church. And it tells that story, and then it gradually goes into after her life that is a narrative. It's a story, narrative. You could just sit down and read it like a story. And then it goes into the more historical things, how the different things develop. So now it becomes more like a history book. And then it goes from there into the part where it shows why the things that are taught about Mary, how they stack up to what the Bible says. What is the biblical truth? And again, this is really where the mother's heart comes into it, because there are theologians out there that have all these ideas, but they never look from a woman's perspective. And that's the woman's perspective. And then the last chapter is called Why Jesus? Why it has to be Jesus. So that's the evangelical part. So it's actually 4 books in one. So that would definitely make it unique.
I like it. And it really, I think that in doing it that way, perhaps it helps people follow along and, and takes them on the journey so that they're able to digest it and keep going and move forward instead of feeling overwhelmed. And it's like, oh, okay, gotcha. On to the next part. I like that. Very, very smart on your end. Now, it is time for us to go to break, Sharon. But before we do, can you please remind everyone of the title of your book, where they can get a copy, and, of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay, the book is Why Mary? From a Mother's Heart, A Fresh Perspective. It's available on Amazon. You can reach me through my website, SharonLawlor.com. or on Facebook as Sharon Lawlor Author. And I'm also on YouTube as Sharon Lawlor.
Alrighty, listeners, now you know where you can get a copy of the book. We'll be back right after this. And we are back. Thank you so much for joining me for Daily Spark with Dr. Angela. I am your host, Dr. Angela Chester. My guest today is Sharon Lawlor, and we're talking about her book, Why Mary? From a Mother's Heart. I love the title. So, Sharon, I love what you were talking about with your book, Why Mary? And looking at it from the perspective of, a woman reflecting upon another woman. And you're right, it needs to be looked at from that perspective. Now, when you were writing, did you happen to have a favorite part of the book? Was there a particular chapter that perhaps you liked writing better than another, or was there a particular message that you wanted to include that you really enjoyed including?
Yes, there. In the first part, the story of Empress Pulcheria, she was such a powerful woman. I so enjoyed writing about her, even though she was she had some ideas that were not right. I just loved writing about how she had such an influence over her brother, who became emperor when she really should have been the emperor. She was the smart one. and how she, even though her argument against one of the great theologians of her day, even though she was wrong and he was right, still the battle between the two of them was so much fun to write about. It was his name was Nestorius. And people talk about that, about the council at Ephesus. And I learned so much more about that than you would ever read in a book of religious history. And it was so much fun writing that part because I really admired her. She was quite a woman.
Now, when you were, you have your book in hand and you want to get it out to, the masses. And dealing with COVID-19, how we market our books and how we get it out there to the world has changed a little bit. So we no longer have the book signings and, those in-person things anymore. So how have you been able to continue to share the message of your book and let people know, hey, this awesome book is available and you need a copy?
Okay, so I have a Facebook page that's called Sharon Lawlor Author, all one word. And I put a lot of things on there besides the book itself. Every once in a while I'll go in and remind them the book's available, but the picture there is the book, all right? So that it is for the book. I haven't pushed the book itself as much as just encouraging people to come in and like my website so that on those times when I do push it, then they are getting that information. It makes a wonderful gift to a Catholic friend. And when I was selling it one-on-one with people, I had people buying multiple copies for their Catholic friends because it is a beautiful book. It's less than 200 pages. So all that stuff I told you about is all very concise, but it's also a beautiful book. It's just beautiful to look at. So social media is where we're marketing it.
And I think you're so smart by doing that because I think people are already used to going to certain places like, okay, we're on Facebook, right? I know what Facebook is. It's not like it's a concept that you have to explain to people. They're familiar with that, and I think most people feel comfortable going to Facebook. So that's really smart, and to keep everyone in the know. Good job there. Now, if there were 20 books on the subject on the shelf, why would someone choose your book, do you think? Is it your cover? Do you have something interesting there? Did you choose colors that help it stand out? Or do you think your title's curious? Bookshelf, 20 books, why your book?
Because it's beautiful. It is a beautiful turquoise color, which people would consider to be Mary's color, and the color of the Virgin Mary. It has a beautiful rose on the front. The rose, I looked all over the place for this, finally ended up having to order it from Ecuador, but it is red and white petals. The top is red, the bottom's white. To me, that symbolizes the blood and righteousness of Christ. But the roses are associated with Mary also, so it has the rose. And if it was on, if all you saw was the spine, my sister saw it, and she said, well, that's really pretty. It's turquoise. It's got, but you need, so we actually put the rose on the spine as well. So, so you'll see this turquoise colored book with a rose on the spine, and then you'll pull it out, and it's got this beautiful rose and just filigree, white filigree around the edges. It's a beautiful book. It makes a beautiful gift just because it's so pretty.
Yes. No, it's so beautiful.
It is.
I can understand that. And you're right. I don't think that a lot of people are aware of like when it's Christmas time and people see like the blue for Christmas and they go, blue, why is it blue? And I've often said, yeah, that's Mary's color. And they were like, I thought it was a whole peacock theme kind of thing. And it's like,
yeah,
those are Mary's colors. And it's like, exactly. They're like, wow, I learned something today. So you're right. It's again thinking outside of the box, thinking differently, and looking at it from a different perspective. I love it. I love it. Now, for someone who says, Sharon, I like what you're doing. I think you are really providing a service here. I want to get a copy of your book. To that person, what is the number one thing that you want them to take away from your book? What overall message do you want them to leave with?
The overall message of the book is that there is only one way to faith, to salvation, and that's through Jesus Christ. There is only one way. It's nice to think about Jesus' mother, but the last chapter is why Jesus? That he is the only way. And the only way to life, the only way to light, the only way to love. So that's the takeaway. That's the takeaway from the whole book. But also, we can learn a lot from women who are very powerful. And Empress Pulcheria was, but she was also misinformed about some things. So it's important that if you're a powerful woman or you have a desire to be a powerful woman and you want to learn more about how to be that, which you can learn from her, you also have to learn that you need to know the truth. And the truth is Jesus Christ.
I love it. Sharon Lawlor, thank you so much for coming on. I think that you have definitely been that inspiration that so many women out there needed. They needed to hear your message and to be reminded of how women can and do have a voice. I love it. Thank you again for being on the show. Now, but before I let you go, though, if you could remind everyone one more time the title of your book, where we can get a copy, and of course, how do we stay in contact with you?
Okay. Book is Why Marry? From a Mother's Heart of Fresh Perspective by Sharon Lawlor. It is available on Amazon, and you can reach me through my Facebook page, Sharon Lawlor Author, or through YouTube, which is Sharon Lawlor, or my website, SharonLawlor.com. And you can email me there too.
I love it. Thank you again, Sharon, for being on the show today.
It's my pleasure.
And listeners, we want to thank you for tuning in as well. We hope that we have enlightened, inspired, and empowered you to be your best self. As always, may the Lord continue to shine his face upon you. May you receive his grace and his mercy in all that you do. Until next time, everyone, remember, you are blessed in the Lord. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.